Hi, fifth graders. So you guys just watched a video all about this thing called symbolism, or symbols in literature. We learned, hi Bindi, we learned from that video that symbolism is when an author takes an object that's either alive or not alive and uses it to represent or have a different meaning in a story. So like we talked about in that video, Adam and Eve, and in Snow White, how the apple is a symbol for something else other than just being an apple. So in Adam and Eve, it talked about how the apple was a symbol for temptation. Or in Snow White, the apple is a symbol for evil or something bad. So what we're going to do today is we're going to read chapter 6 of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and we're going to think about symbols and symbolism and focus on specifically one thing in this chapter and talk about what we think it might represent. So the way that we're going to do this read Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe now is you guys are going to be following along at home. So everybody does need to have their book out. And I'm going to trust that you have your book out, and I want you to be following along while I read, just like we do in class. All right? I'm going to stop and ask some questions as we go, and I want you to think about those questions. Obviously, you can't raise your hand and answer them, but think about them because that's going to come in handy later. All right, here we go. Chapter 6 is on page 54, and it's called Into the Forest. I wish the Macready would hurry up and take all these people away, said Susan presently. I'm getting horribly cramped. And what a filthy smell of camphor, said Edmund. I expect the pockets of these coats are full of it, said Susan, to keep away the moths. There's something sticking in my back, said Peter. And isn't it cold? Said Susan. Now that you mention it, it is cold, said Peter. And hang it all, it's wet too. What's the matter with this place? I'm sitting on something wet. It's getting wetter every minute. He struggled to his feet. Let's get out, said Edmund. They've gone. Oh, said Susan suddenly, and everyone asked her what was the matter. I'm sitting against a tree, said Susan. And look, it's getting light over there. By Jove, you're right, said Peter. And look there, and there, it's trees all around. And this wet stuff, it's snow. Why, I do believe we got into Lucy's wood after all. And now there was no mistaking it, and all four children stood blinking in the daylight of a winter day. Behind them were coats hanging on pegs, and in front of them were snow-covered trees. Peter turned at once to Lucy. I apologize for not believing you, he said. I'm sorry. Will you shake hands? Of course, said Lucy, and she did. And now, said Susan, what do we do next? Do? Said Peter. Why, go and explore the wood, of course. Ugh, said Susan, stamping her feet. It's pretty cold. What about putting on some of these coats? They're not ours, though, said Peter doubtfully. I'm sure nobody would mind, said Susan. It isn't as if we wanted to take them out of the house. We shan't take them even out of the wardrobe. I never thought of that, Sue, said Peter. Of course, now you put it that way, I see. No one could say you had bagged a coat as long as you leave it in the wardrobe where you found it. And I suppose this whole country is in the wardrobe. They immediately carried out Susan's very sensible plan. The coats were rather too big for them, and that they came down to their heels and looked more like royal robes than coats when they had put them on. But they all felt a good deal warmer, and each thought the others looked better in their new get-up and more suitable to the landscape. We can pretend we are Arctic explorers, said Lucy. This is going to be exciting enough without pretending, said Peter. As he began leading the way forward into the forest, there were heavy, darkish clouds overhead, and it looked as if there might be more snow before night. I say, began Edmund presently, ought we be bearing a bit more to the left, that is, if we are aiming for the lamppost? He had forgotten for the moment that he must pretend never to have been in the wood before. The moment the words were out of his mouth, he realized that he had given himself away. Everyone stopped, everyone stared at him, and Peter whistled. So, you really were here, he said. That time Lou said she'd met you in here, and you made out like she was telling lies. There was dead silence. Well, of all the poisonous little beasts, said Peter, and shrugged his shoulders and said no more. There seemed indeed no more to say, and presently the four resumed their journey. But Edmund was saying to himself, I'll pay you all out for this, you pack of stuck-up, self-satisfied prigs. Where are we going anyway, said Susan, chiefly for the sake of changing the subject. I think Lou ought to be the leader, said Peter. Goodness knows she deserves it. Where will you take us, Lou? What about going to see Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. He's the nice faun I told you about. Everyone agreed to this, and off they went, walking briskly and stamping their feet. Lucy proved a good leader. At first she wondered whether she would be able to find the way, but she recognized an odd-looking tree in one place and a stump in another, and brought them on to where the ground became uneven and into the little valley, and at last to the very door of Mr. Tumnus's cave. But there a terrible surprise awaited them. So I want you to pause for a second and think about what might be waiting for them when they get there. Think about what happened to Mr. Tumnus, who he was working for, and what he said was going to happen to him when he didn't capture Lucy. So just take a quick second and think about that. The door had been wrenched off of its hinges and broken to bits. Inside, the cave was dark and cold and had the damp feel and smell of a place that had not been lived in for several days. Snow had drifted in front of the doorway and was heaped on the floor, mixed with something black, which turned out to be the charred sticks and ashes from the fire. Someone had apparently flung it about the room and then stamped on it. The crockery lay smashed on the floor, and the picture of the fawn's father had been slashed into shreds with a knife. "This is a pretty good washout," said Edmund. "Not much good coming here." "What is this?" said Peter, stooping down. He had just noticed a piece of paper which had been nailed through the carpet to the floor. "Is there anything written on it?" asked Susan. "Yes, I think there is," answered Peter, "but I can't read it in this light. Let's get out into the open air." They all went out into the daylight and crowded around Peter as he read out the following words. "The former occupants of this premise, the Fawn Tumnus, is under arrest and awaiting his trial on a charge of high treason against Her Imperial Majesty, Jadis, Queen of Narnia, Chatelaine of Cair Paravel, and Empress of the Lone Islands, etc. Also of comforting her said Majesty's enemies, harboring spies, and fraternizing with humans. Signed, Maugrim, Captain of the Secret Police. Long live the Queen." The children stared at one another, not knowing what to do. "I don't know that I'm going to like this place after all," said Susan. "Who is this Queen, Lou?" said Peter. "Do you know anything about her?" "She isn't a real queen at all," answered Lucy. "She's a horrible witch, the White Witch. All the wooded people hate her. She has made an enchantment over the whole country so that it is always winter here and never Christmas." I wonder if there's any point in going on," said Susan. "I mean, it doesn't seem particularly safe here, and it looks as if it won't be much fun either. And it's getting colder every minute. And we've brought nothing to eat. What about just going home?" "Oh, but we can't," said Lucy suddenly. "Don't you see? We can't just go home. Not after this. It's all on my account that the poor fawn has gotten into this trouble. He hid me from the witch and showed me the way back. That's what it means by comforting the Queen's enemies and fraternizing with humans. We simply must try to rescue him." "A lot we could do," said Edmund, "when we haven't gotten anything to eat." "Shut up, you," said Peter, who was still very angry with Edmund. "What do you think, Susan?" "I've got a horrid feeling that Lou is right," said Susan. "I don't want to go a step further, and I'd wish we had never come. But I think we must try to do something for Mr. whatever his name is. I mean the fawn." "That's what I feel too," said Peter. "I'm worried about having no food with us. I'd vote for going back and getting something from the larder, only there doesn't seem to be any certainty of getting into this country again once you've got out of it. I think we'll have to go on." "So do I," said both the girls. "If only we knew where the poor chap was imprisoned," said Peter. They were all still looking what to do next, and Lucy said, "Look, there's a robin with such a red breast. It's the first robin I've ever seen here. I say, I wonder, can all birds talk in Narnia? It almost looks as if it wants to say something to us." Then she turned to the robin and said, "Please, can you tell us where Tumnus the fawn has been taken to?" As she said this, she took a step forward towards the bird. It at once flew away, but only as far as to the next tree. There it perched and looked at them very hard, as if it understood all they had been saying. Almost without noticing that they had done so, the four children went a step or two nearer to it. At this, the robin flew away again to the next tree, and once more looked at them very hard. You couldn't have found a robin with a redder chest or a brighter eye. "Do you know," said Lucy, "I really believe that he means us to follow him." "I've an idea he does," said Susan. "What do you think, Peter?" "Well, we might as well try it," answered Peter. The robin appeared to understand the matter thoroughly. It kept going from tree to tree, always a few yards ahead of them, but always so near that they could easily follow it. In the way it led them on slightly downhill. Wherever the robin alighted, a little shower of snow would fall off the branch. Presently the clouds parted overhead, and the winter sun came out, and the snow all around them grew dazzlingly bright. They had been traveling in this way for about a half an hour, with the two girls in the front, when Edmund said to Peter, "If you're not still too high and mighty to talk to me, I have something to say which you better listen to." "What is it?" asked Peter. "Hush, not so loud," said Edmund. "There's no good frightening the girls. But have you realized what we're doing?" "What?" said Peter, lowering his voice to a whisper. "We're following a guide we know nothing about. How do you know which side that bird is on? Why shouldn't it be leading us into a trap?" "That's a nasty idea. Still, a robin, you know. They're good birds in all the stories that I've ever read. I'm sure a robin wouldn't be on the wrong side. If it comes to that, which is the right side? How do we know that the fawns are the right and the queen, yes, I know we've been told she's a witch, is in the wrong? We don't really know anything about either." "The fawn saved Lucy. He said that he did, but how do we know? And there's another thing too. Has anyone the least idea of the way home from here?" Why do you think that Edmund would be wanting his siblings to question which side is the right side? Take a second and just think about that. "Great Scott," said Peter. "I hadn't thought of that." "And no chance of dinner either," said Edmund. And that's where we're going to stop. So I want you guys to flip back to page 60, on the big paragraph right on the bottom, right where it starts, that says, "They were all still wondering what to do next." This is the point where Lucy sees the robin. This is the one symbol that I want us to really focus on in this chapter. So what we know about Narnia so far is that the White Witch is in charge, and there's a good side and a bad side, and she's on the bad side. And what she's done is she has turned Narnia, she's put a spell over it where it makes it always winter but never Christmas. And Lucy talks about how this is the first robin that she has seen in Narnia since she's been there. I want you guys to take a second and think about, when do you usually see more birds out? You see a robin, you hear birds singing. Is that usually during winter, or is that maybe during a different season? So what do you think this robin might be symbolizing based on what is happening in chapter 6? Okay, so now that we're done reading, I need you guys to go ahead and go back to the assignment, and you're going to fill out the Google form that is attached to it, which you're going to tell me what you think the robin symbolizes and answer a couple other questions about the chapter that we just read. Okay, bye guys.